Hello, everybody. Welcome. So glad and grateful to have some time together today to explore some issues that are timely, shall we say. Many of you are probably unfamiliar with my work, particularly those who were introduced to my channel by my recent discussion with Amin Hillman. I hope to have many more discussions with Dr. Hillman. It was an amazing time we had together, incredibly fun. And I think we barely scratched the surface because we're sort of just kind of getting to know each other. But yeah, I'm so grateful for those of you who've expressed your enthusiasm and have taken the time to comment and subscribe. I deeply appreciate your support, your sense of curiosity, and your spirit. So today I'm going to explore a variety of topics, but I was just listening to a very brief post on YouTube by, I think, Bruce Zabel. And he was talking about what we might loosely encompass, in the concept of, what's going on with UFOs and UAPs. The UFO term has recently changed to UAP, so it used to mean unidentified flying object. Kind of weird since that presumes it's flying and that we know what flying is. Of course, we know what the word refers to, right? It refers to being suspended above, like between space and the Earth's surface. Yeah. This has recently been changed to unidentified anomalous phenomena. Zabel was saying that a variety of credible people and sources have come forward and declared that secretively certain factions within the United States government, the military industrial complex, and other bizarre branches of what has largely captured our humanity have known for a long time some information of some kind about these phenomena. And I found what he was saying fascinating, but also very confused. So one of the things that he said was that it's clear that these phenomena have posed threats to what he called human liberty and perhaps health. And that this was the justification, in a sense, or a justification, for demanding answers from our government and perhaps the military. I think that before we get too excited about that, we should bear in mind a variety of crucially important perspectives. The first is that your government is not yours. It isn't a human being. It is incapable of caring. What it has could be compared to motivations, but they are not the motivations of human beings. They are the motivations of dead inside processes which have captured human beings and then sort of imposed roles on those human beings, which then become very important to protect and to further complicate and obscure. So it's a kind of a strange idea that the government would tell us, ordinary folks, what's going on. Similarly, the military-industrial complex is not yours. It doesn't belong to you. The services that it provides for you come at an ever-increasing cost curve, a curve that must eventually increase so cataclysmically that it obliterates either you and everything there ever was or will be, or most of that. That's not human. And in terms of what it knows, it's almost as if a kind of a, how to put this, an array of deleterious and often malignant processes captures and transforms humans into the agents of its nourishment, propagation, um, continuance, and development. So, while it may be true that humans have suffered from contact with let's be really clear about this, the broad array of phenomena captured under the rubrics of UFOs, non-human intelligence, UAP, and so on. There's no, it's impossible that that's a single phenomena. This is a kind of a light that we use to shine on certain phenomena that we have questions about, right? And the phenomena must be very diversely composed. As we will certainly discover, all phenomena are. So when we form a frame through which we want to ask questions or look at something, and that frame becomes unconscious, right? It submerges in our awareness so that we're no longer aware of it. It becomes impossible to entertain perspectives or explanations that either threaten or violate that frame. And both the military prison industrial complexes of the earth and the governments of the earth are, in a sense, these kinds of frames wrought into domineering, lethal, and catastrophically expensive in more ways than money, but certainly in terms of money, processes that are consuming the history and future of life on this world. If anything was alien or threatening or harmful in our common experience, the thing that kills most of us is those things, or are those things, right? Um, we've recently suffered from COVID, and it's not clear whether that virus was intentionally engineered or was the complex result of humans very ignorantly relating with other organisms, or a combination of both, or both of those things, and 15 others we have not yet introduced into our concern or awareness. So you can see that if you just have a very simple question, did it come from a lab in China, or was it a result of zoological transmission between humans or animals? This frame is not complex enough to understand the phenomena. And Zabel was implying that we should be very fierce in our requests for information. We should come together and pursue information from the government and the military-industrial prison complex about UFOs and UAPs. Okay. But why would we suppose that these bizarre, dangerous, non-human features of our common human experience would know what's going on, right, with UFOs or UAP? Now, there may have been transmissions of intelligence between non-human intelligences and organs of the government or the military-industrial complex. There are a variety of more than merely anecdotal reports of this having taken place. Nonetheless, the mindset of people in the military-industrial complex or the intelligence community or the government would largely prohibit them from actually understanding a phenomena or a broad range of phenomena that are so unlike our ontologies and our pictures of what stuff is and what it's for and what it does, that to entertain the actual answers would obliterate our ontologies. It would destroy them. Why would it do that? Well, the primary reason is that most of our ontologies are deceptively crude. They are conglomerations of frames that so limit our capacity for awareness, insight, intelligence, understanding, concern, that they are often as blinding as they are revelatory, right? So it's sort of like if you put on a pair of sunglasses that attenuated what you could see so that organisms disappeared and only machines were available to your vision, then you would vastly misunderstand what the nature of the earth is, or a human being, or anything like that. And this is the problem with both the myths that have long fascinated and enchanted us, and those occasional glimpses of the beyond of those myths, which then mostly gets captured and incorporated either into the existing myths or some new myth. And in this case, what I mean by myth is a compelling and rather blinding fiction. There's a much more serious problem here than just the fact that the military and the government are precisely the wrong organs of our human social constructs to approach this phenomena, to relate with it, and most particularly to explain to us what it is. For the military, the possibility of acquiring technologies, ways of making devices effectively, from non-human intelligences comprises the holy grail of asymmetric military advantage, which is a primary feature of what our governments and their funding of the military is seeking, right? What one desires in this bizarre, inhuman, and insane array of scenarios is a way to so threaten one's enemies that either they must submit to you or you can be confident that they won't start a fight. Um, these, of course, are among the most ignorant and just devastating of collective human orientations, right? So these are the wrong people to tell us what something is, and they are also the wrong branch of human communal endeavor to make contact with or make deals with what we might think of as non-human intelligences. Unfortunately, there's an even more foundational problem if you want to know what's going on. And that's the problem that, in point of fact, neither science nor religion, nor any existing branch of human knowledge traditions has the slightest idea what anything is. What we mostly have are words and explanations. So the words are defined circularly so that, for example, if you look in a dictionary and you look at the definition of a word, what you will see is that the word is defined using, go figure, other words, which have definitions defined by other words. None of us, well, it's not entirely true, okay? There are branches of human curiosity and knowledge and wisdom seeking that have penetrated the veil of representational cognition, which is mostly what we lead each other around by the nose with, and can tell you something meaningful about the nature of the big questions: birth, incarnation, death, souls, existence itself, God, the sky, the world, and so forth. Mostly these are found in the uh, monastic traditions that underlie the secular traditions in what we think of as organized religion. And generally speaking, the older these traditions, relatively speaking, the more trustworthy they are. I'm thinking specifically of traditions like Shaivism, Advaita Vedanta, um, Taoism, and some of the more or less recent mystical traditions, the traditions of the ancient Greeks and the mysteries of Eleusina, um, the later development of complex Hebrew, um, Kabbalistic spirituality, and perhaps some branches of the rather peculiar child of ancient mysticism that are associated with this word magic with a K at the end, maybe, right? Um, so there are traditions whereby you can get outside the very thickly walled prison system of words. But one thing that I think is really important to get clearly in mind is that the fact that you know what something is called tells you nothing about it. Nothing at all. You know what a tree is in terms of what that um, semantic label points toward. Does this tell you what the nature of a tree is? No, it doesn't. And as we undergo the processes of enlanguaging and enculturation, one of the peculiar sequelae or results of that is that there's a kind of trenchant, egregious disenchantment that occurs, where knowing the name for something mostly dismisses your intimacy with it. So that the wild fascination and curiosity that we have with being and existence and play and discovery and wonder and awe and terror and beauty that we naturally just flows into and out of us as children gets wildly inhibited, if not amputated, for many of us in many aspects of our humanity as we undergo the continuing processes of language and enculturation so that we can fit into the representational labyrinth of nonsense, lethally, deadly, blinding nonsense, agonizing rip-offs and con games that comprise what we think of as civilization, which is one of the biggest oxymorons in our language. What we have are not civilizations. They are not societies. They are counterfeits, complexly mechanistic counterfeits that capture and inhibit a vast library of our otherwise natural faculties, abilities, natures, intelligences, creativities, and sell us back the least broken versions that don't violate the frame that is so important to preserve that we're willing to snuff the planet to just keep those lies afloat. Okay. And the idea that you know who someone is, their name does not tell you anything about who they are. If you have some experience of a person, you still don't know who they are because you've never seen them in a context where their natural gifts and deficits would be celebrated, supported, evoked, and invoked, right? Often, part of the reason that people can be drawn into war is that in a context that dire, the sort of wild, storm-like interiority of our humanity often emerges unexpectedly and is expressed and enacted and embodied by us, not just through killing other humans or other beings or obliterating whole landscapes. But the intensity of that, right, that context where this is about life or death, it doesn't matter what you think, what you believe, that extremis, right, that extremity is likely to ignite something in us, or at least we will feel, perhaps for a moment, that though we are in a hellish situation of humans murdering each other, um, that it, the presence of the possibility of immediate death tends to call forth aspects of ourselves that we are unfamiliar with in our common lives. Thankfully, there are vastly more interesting, amazing, and beautiful ways of doing that than killing each other. Um, War is one of the things that has driven my curiosity about what broke our species in this way and in many other ways since I was a child, because it was inconceivable to me that humans would ever really want to be violent to each other or anything at all. It was just unlike my nature to entertain that possibility and certainly to enact it. Um, Now, this disenchantment that happens when we learn the name of something also happens when we receive an explanation. Then we think, oh, I know how that works. No, you don't. The people that you think you know, they don't know themselves. It's impossible to know a person. A person is a uniquely embodied infinite array of potentials and possibilities, gifts, deficits, passions, curiosities, fears, hopes, dreams, visions. The person represents the entire continuum of not just um, the vast population of beings that have ever lived on this world. They are an embodiment of time space itself. They are infinite. And in our common experience, the scope of what we are likely to encounter of ourselves or other people is incredibly limited. So you may be able to somewhat predict how someone will act or respond within a representational context that is familiar, such as the office, right? Or the grocery store, or the gas station, or the courtroom. Sure. But that doesn't mean you know them. Most of us so rarely encounter a context that brings us fully to life. I mean, unless we seek that actively and forge it together and then enact it together and live that way together, if only for a brief time, that we have no idea what it means to be human. We have some descriptions and explanations, and we've been disenchanted, right, by these descriptions and explanations from science, religion, the academy, and so forth, mostly which are a lot of fictional nonsense that doesn't violate the frame of our civilization that's just not civil. Uh-huh. It's civil to the effect that, or to the degree that I can walk out my door and will be unlikely to encounter arbitrary violence directed against me or those I love. Yeah, that can happen too. The fact that we're surrounded by cars is vastly more dangerous than the fact that things that we call UFOs and UAPs exist. If those things represented any significant threat to us, we would know about that. Now, it can also be obscured, right? We'll get to that in a moment. So, first of all, we have all these frames that we're introduced to, and we take them up and we see the world through them. And then we think we know what's going on. You can know what's going on if your concerns are simple enough, that the scope is limited enough that your frame works at that scale, right? So if I, want to boil some water, I can understand how to make that happen. That's a thin scope, right? Small number of concerns. I can make that happen as long as I have fire, a pot, some water, whatever, right? So the problem is when we transfer the expectation of knowledge of very simple, pragmatic things onto stuff like what's going on, or what does it mean to be human? What are UFOs? What is the sky? What is the sun? Um, there's something that I want you to think very carefully about if you don't believe in God. And I'm not asking you to believe in God. In fact, I'm not asking you to believe anything. But think very long and hard about the fact that there's an object in our solar system without which you don't exist. You will not have minds, bodies, arguments, beliefs, theories, explanations, language, nothing. Nothing, right? If you take the sun away, there's nothing. The entire history of humanity, gone, right? Organisms, living planet, gone. Now, effectively, I'd like to suggest that the sun and the moon and the earth and the objects that we are aware of locally in time space are not objects. And in fact, they are something transcendental to the categories in our lexicons. So we have words we can point to them with, and we have, sort of weird, also kind of dead inside scientific explanations. Oh, the sun is a fusion event formed from gases under gravity, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to dismiss all that, but its authority is pretty limited because it certainly doesn't explain the existence of minds or beings or anything. Our species has no idea how life started here. We have stories about evolution, that's interesting, but it doesn't explain speciation. It doesn't explain why there's an animal like ours on this world. And when we think about science, we find that it's trying to filter off anything that violates the sort of eliminative materialist or the reductive materialist frameworks that our science has become absolutely bound up with. And part of the reason and the history of that binding is science's subjugation to making machines and to serving the interests of war, primarily, war and profit, right? So it's possible, right, that there are features of the UFO UAP phenomenon that are dangerous. It is impossible that they are as dangerous as our governments, our corporations, and the military-industrial prison complex. If any of those phenomena were highly advanced, which we must imagine some of them are, whatever we may think that means, it should be fairly clear that they could just snuff us, right, if that was their goal. And if their goal was to kidnap millions of us, there isn't anything we could do about that. The features, what I'm trying to get at is that the features of our common experience as humans in modernity are surrounded by an array of non-human threats enacted by human beings that are more dangerous than pretty much anything you can possibly imagine, and just keep generating new threats and lethal processes and agendas and motivations as if that's what we are for, or that's what we're supposed to be doing, quote unquote. So that's much more bizarre. That's the thing we should be trying to understand and change together. The worries about like, well, is it a military forget it. If it comes from time spaces, your chance of like throwing missiles at it and stuff, zero. Just not going to happen. It's like people with pea shooters trying to fight somebody with a B-1 bomber or a hypersonic missile. It's just useless. Just give it up. But I want to return to a specific concern in terms of human knowledge. The kind of knowledge, the form of knowledge that we moderns are familiar with is not knowledge. That is the skeletal remains of what could have become insight if we didn't kill it and box it and put it in a frame. So we know the word tree, but very, very few of us have the slightest conception of what a tree is. And to be entirely frank, I've never met, that I know of, a single person who knows what anything is. If you could possibly somehow, and I think there are ways, get not even the right idea, just a much better idea than we usually have about what any phenomena is, an organism, um, a leaf, a rock, the sun, any of those things. If you could just open the aperture of your intelligence enough to encompass more of the phenomena, it would almost certainly shred the fictions that you have held in place of insight, understanding, relationship, and intimacy. So there's nothing you can learn about lips that will communicate the experience of kissing someone you adore. Nothing. It's just not ever going to happen. There's no there's no collection of photographs or descriptions or explanations that can possibly introduce you to the flavor of food in your mouth. And that knowledge is intimacy. And that's the kind of knowledge that we ache for. The stuff that we're using instead, it shuts down the faculties with which we might acquire insight, have an experience of something more like intelligence, and have relational intimacy with our own being, our living planet, the situation of time, space, and existence. Nothing in science is going to give you that. Nothing in lexicons that we have will give you that. And our lexicons, I'm telling you, as having had an experience of the thing that our lexicons are derivatives of in an actual intelligence, our lexicons are garbage, right? They're the fossilized remains of what could have become insight. You know, I remember one day I was talking with a new friend, Luca Rade. He was in Portugal at the time, and it was our first conversation. I was in my departed father's backyard, and we were just wildly engaged in the pursuit of insight and learning each other's lexicons and minds. And he's an absolutely brilliant spirit and being. And I was so excited. And suddenly, into the backyard, there flew something that I did not know what it was. It was a little smaller than a hummingbird. It was kind of loud. It was sort of buzzy. And it was like iridescent turquoise. And it flew around the yard for a long, long time. Well, for 4 or 5 minutes. And I wanted to take a picture of it, but it never landed. I wanted to take a picture of it. It's really important. Wanted to get the fossil of the image so that I could get a clear look at it, right? I wasn't able to photograph it. It never landed. And after observing it for a while, I felt that it bore a strong resemblance to a symbol that's always been important to me, and the creature as well, the scarab from Egyptian art. And so I was fascinated by that. Having an experience of a living organism that I had never seen before and wasn't even really sure what it was happened a couple of times in Stockton, where my father used to live while I was there at his house. And a few days later, maybe a week and a half later, I was walking to the grocery store. And I looked down on the ground and I found the carcass that was the same creature that had been flying around in the backyard. And I picked up the carcass and took it with me. And, I was able to look at it very closely. And that's when it struck me that actual intelligence is like the experience of wonder and awe and fascination and desire that I felt when the living creature was circling the yard. And the kind of thing we have is like that dead thing that was in my hand later, the carcass of that, sort of the fossilized remains of what might have become intimacy, intelligence, revelation, insight, discovery, wonder, awe, terror at the beauty and the mystery of existence. If there are humans on this world that can tell you about any phenomenon, what it is, I'd love to meet them. What we do, generally speaking, as representational cognitives, is we dismiss all of that. Once we have a token and an explanation to go along with it, we tokenize relationships and then we exchange these tokens as if they were a kind of currency in consciousness. And there are features of that that aren't entirely devastating, but a lot of it, if not most of it, is devastating. And the existence of money, banking systems, the courtrooms, the military, the government, and so forth, all of these features of our experience, they communicate their motivations and structures into our awareness and our consciousness and our behavior moment to moment, which is why most of us are slaves to jobs that are so miserable that nobody would really want to do them if there was anything else we could do together or even alone that was not as prisoneered as the office, right? Or the chores, the sort of endless parade of bullshit jobs that we think we are supposed to have in order to make money, in order to pay the rent, in order to get medical care, in order. Um, so what I'm asking you to entertain for a moment in your awareness is the fact that no one knows what anything is. There's nobody around who can tell you what's going on. And if there are people like that, it's not scientists, right? That branch of knowledge is interesting and useful, but it's absolutely deadly if it's at the service of the military or the governments or corporations or big pharma or any of that stuff, right? It just gets completely compromised. Its findings become weaponized against the history and future of life on Earth, our own intelligence, and so forth. Though there are many branches of science that fascinate me and I would sing their praises, I just think it's incredibly unfortunate that those findings are turned against the spirit of intelligence, the spirit of being, the spirit of life, the spirit of origin, our capacities to be human together. And so what we get instead is a lot of machines, poisonous tech, war, constant threats, bizarre legalistic systems that are as senseless as they are ineffective, and so forth, right? It's the most, if you were to come to this world from a world that was intelligent, it would just be absolutely boggling. Be like, what got broken here? That, what are these busted monkeys? How did they get broke that way, right? And even our own children, right? They know this. And many of us throughout our lives, we carry this urgent concern of like, what the went wrong around here? Like, how is there any way to fix this? It just seems it's devastating to our hearts and our souls and our ancestors and our children. The children are well aware in their, as they start to become in language and enculturated, that the adults are clearly insane, right? They're just doing all these things that don't make any kind of sense. Now, sometimes the children get excited about the insanity and just join in, as vigorously and enthusiastically as possible. So just hold in your awareness that none of us know what anything is. And on the other side of that is an even stranger perspective, which is that anything is everything. There aren't any separate things that are merely distinctly alone themselves. There are no things like that, except in language or in thought. So that's another one of the fictions, right? That there are separate persons. Your mind is separate from the mind of others. There's no chance of that being true. Many of the features of what we think of as non-ordinary experience, right? The continuum that involves things like telepathy, remote viewing, touch healing, bilocation, teleportation, astral travel, magic, and things like this, which many people think are nonsense. It's entirely the other way around. Our nature, those are features of our nature that are shut down and inhibited by the contexts and the way that they shunt awareness, human concern, human motivation into their structure and then basically just calcify it, right? Just make frozen fossils of all that stuff. And if you live in a world where everything you see is fossils, you start to think like one, right? You start to think, yeah, there's no such thing as telepathy. What are you talking about? I've never experienced that. Well, in point of fact, at least 87% of face-to-face human communication is nonverbal. And you can say, well, that's because they see each other's body language and facial expressions and so forth. Yeah, that's true. But if you've never had even a single experience of knowing what is in the mind of another being or another human, and not simply from the physical sort of situation, then that's unfortunate. Realize that if one person ever knew the mind of another being or person, then telepathy exists, right? You'd have to be able to falsify the entirety of the history of minds on Earth and be absolutely certain that there was never even a single case of that. All of those cases had other explanations to falsify the concept of telepathy. And what I'm trying to get at is that my experience, understanding, and direct knowledge about these matters is that we've got all this backwards, right? Our nature, telepathy among humans was vastly common to the ancients. They had no reason to even call it something because it was never distinguished from their common experience, right? So they probably didn't even need a word for it. Most of the stuff we have words for is stuff that either died in our experience or we had to distinguish for some purpose, right? So nobody knows what anything is. The chances that somebody's gonna be able to tell you what UFOs are, they'd have to know what the universe is, right? They'd have to know fundamental things like, why are there beings? Why are there minds? What is the sun? What is the sky? There are 0 people in the government or the military that have that information. That's just not even possible. They may have frames through which they look at the phenomena, and those frames are driven by the concerns of asymmetric military advantage, profit, and power over other humans. So the chances that those organs of our like dead inside civilization come to you and tell you what's going on, those chances are 0, right? And you can make all the noise you want, march, protest, whatever you think might help, it's not going to help. Now, what we might get is disclosure of specific events and or what we think of as physical objects and possibly, corpses or para or biological objects that branches of the military, the industrial prison complex, or the government are, quote, in possession of. Maybe we could get some of that. Would that tell you what it is? Not a chance. And so what you're going to have in a situation like this is you're going to have a bunch of different humans, and they're all going to be trying to tell you that they know what it is, right? Well, I know what it is. It's blibbity blobbity from Sirius. They got transdimensional spaceships and what? Okay, fine. But since we don't know what anything is, how useful are those words, right? Do you know, have you had an experience of transdimensionality? Maybe you have. That would be amazing. I'd love to hear about it. I have my own non-ordinary experiences that radically they obliterated my ontology, and I have a sort of a half human, half non-human interiority and lexicon in the aftermath of those processes, which were themselves as dangerous as they were ecstatic. So the chances that the government's going to come and tell you what's going on are 0. The government has no idea what's going on. Just like, how could a non-human thing know stuff? What is that knowledge comprised of? What are its elements? How are they woven together? Right? The military is thinking in terms of threat and advantage, and maybe of intelligence. Obviously, any group of humans, any cohort of humans in possession of intelligence, artifacts, or bodies that aren't, let's call them aren't familiar to humans, right? We don't really know what it means to not be from this earth, because if the earth is from everything and everything is from everything, then everything is from everything, right? The earth is from that which all things are from. So if you look at it from that perspective, there's nothing alien except things like the government, corporations, the military industrial prison complex, um, ideologies that capture humans and transform their roles and agencies in ways that are as specific as they are limited. So these questions are fascinating to me. I've been curious about UFOs and UAPs since I was a very small child. I grew up reading and watching science fiction, and that had a profound impact on me. In fact, that was my primary educational origin, right? With thousands of science fiction stories that I read. I mean, at least 1,000, probably a few thousand. And I never realized it was possible to become more than science fiction. But in this phase of my life, I have. And I think, we are very confused to think that you are human. Because whatever you are, the aspect of you that's human, that's a very small aspect compared to the other parts, which are unique forms of infinitizations of being and origin dancing together in time space around this thing you call a body. Certainly, an actually intelligent people of any kind, whether they have bodies or whether they invent bodies briefly to just as we, for example, put on a diving suit to go into the water, there might be beings that put on something similar to come into the material layer of existence and explore and relate in that. This seems to very probably be part of what is going on with UFOs and UAPs. And again, it's a broad, complex library of different phenomena. The fact that we have a few terms to refer to it with is an indication of just how ignorant generally we are. And we mostly want to continue being. That's why we want an explanation. I mean, we have failed to explain anything. We know a few mechanical things. Science is like 200 years old, okay? Any organism that you see is probably thousands of billions of life years old. Any organism you see, right? So you got the human knowledge tradition we call science, brand new. We are probably not yet in kindergarten. So the idea that that branch of knowledge is going to tell you what's going on is ridiculous. And most of what we use that for is to build machines. It's a bad idea. Let me be really, let me just explain that organisms play with energy in a way that sustains the manifold of the possibility of life on this world. Okay, so they play with the energy together in this way. They uniquely structure and exchange it in a way that produces actually biorelational hyperstructures and temporal hyperstructures. If there were aliens or non-human intelligences interested in the Earth, one of the things they'd be interested in are those fields that incredibly diverse organismal symbiotic networks produce and sustain locally. That's what would interest them. I happen to know they are interested in that. And they don't want some broken monkeys burning that down because it doesn't belong to the broken monkeys. It belongs to all beings in all of time. It belongs to the universe. And the universe belongs to it. Where's I going? I think I've lost my train of thought. I got so excited. Let's see here. So, we use explanations to evict mystery, novelty, actual insight, although explanations can provide some insight too. And there are certain forms of explanations that naturally produce insight in our awareness, consciousness, thought, and experience, our reflection. By reflecting on them, they give us new perspectives that we had not previously entertained. And those kinds of things, which tend to be more poetic than they are didactic, are very powerful. This points up another problem. We moderns, we are trained to think, and this is also partly the result of science in the academy, however poorly they have been enacted in modernity. we will tend to think, that the facts tell us what is the case, what the case is. Okay. I mean, that's another problem in human cognition, particularly the cognition of moderns, which is peculiarly like had most of its organs amputated and fossilized and fed back to us. That's a problem where the expectation of the solidity and continuity of our physical situation here gets transferred onto how we relate with identity, what things are, what they do, how they are explained to us. That's wildly unfortunate because there's a useful scope in which the facts and what is the case can be pursued without obliterating the possibility of insight, perspective, or intelligence. There's a place for that. We don't want to just get rid of it. On the other hand, when we make that universal generalization that knowledge is just about facts, right? What we call justified true belief in philosophy. Facts they don't exist without minds, okay, first of all. Facts are a product of minds. And the purchase of facts on insight is present, but it's minimal. There are different kinds of truth, right? And nobody's going to tell you in any way that encompasses everything or even encompasses one phenomena what it is. Because all phenomena are infinite. They're fundamentally infinite, all phenomena. What you are, infinite. Where you come from, infinite. And infinite isn't just a really big thing. It's a thing that no matter how far you chase it, it just gets bigger every time you make a move. If you chase it x far, it's x to the 10th bigger. If you chase it x to the 10th far, it's x to the 100th bigger. Infinity isn't like just a really big thing. It's literally unimaginably deep. And all phenomena are unimaginably deep in this way. And what the humans do with language and knowledge and descriptions and explanations and so forth is they pretend to have acquired a grasp on, the nature or identity or function of beings and situations and so forth. It's not untrue. They got a little bit of a grip there. But when they mistake that grip for knowledge, that's when understanding and insight die. So we would do well to be aware, to remain aware, that mystery requires intimacy to understand. You're not going to explain it. It's a thing that you learn through relationship, right? You relate with it. You participate with it. And that's a different kind of truth. The truth of insight is not the truth of facts, though they may sometimes coincide. So the idea that we're going to find out what's going on, that's nonsense. What we might have is the opportunity to relate with the nature of knowledge and intelligence in our own human field of potential in such a way that we expand out of the prisoneered walls of the questions we've answered, right? The conclusions we've come to. Not that, it's entirely bad to answer a question, but when I've come to a conclusion, the door to mystery is closed. I know what's going on. I know what to call that thing, and therefore I know what it is. No, you don't. We don't know anything, really, about anything. And there are a variety of different forms of knowledge that representational knowledge is useful, but the least of by far. So we should turn ourselves around in the situation and seek insight together and ask amazing questions together and chase those questions beyond their initial answers into insight and wonder and anamnesis, to unforgetting of our nature as beings and minds and intelligences and as organs not merely of this world but of the universe, right? Most of you isn't human. And most of that is unknown to you because you think you know what it is to be human. It's sort of like, I mean, the knowledge that we use is like trying to understand a butterfly with a fork, right? You can't see it. You just keep poking it with that fork, right? You get the facts. We as a species, and we can lift each other out of this, right? This is the beautiful potential of our nature. But we as a species, in our minds, we are like beings that have a vast array of different kinds of eyes, and there is no light in there. So we're born for 9 different kinds of seeing as experiential intimacy that most of us have nearly no experience of, or we have some experience of it, but it's usually extremely delimited by the context in which we encounter ourselves and other humans, and the purposes that orient those contexts and keep them spinning and spinning us around in a disoriented quest for what is that. You know, there's this old Zen koan, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Well, if you think about it, trying to figure out what something is kind of like clapping one hand against infinity, right? Like it just goes, what? So yeah, finding out what's going on, I wish you luck. We are what's going on. Why don't we become what's going on together? And then we can inquire together into the living mystery of the nature of our existence, our origin, our faculties that have largely been denied to us, insight and wonder, awe and play and experiment. The universe is playing with itself, not in the sense some of you are thinking, though maybe in that sense too. And we are an aspect of that play. So what's with all this desire to shut it all down with explanations and terms that we think we know what they mean when we don't know what they mean? This knowledge that we've been inculcated with is false. It's not, where it's not beautiful and where it doesn't lead us beyond the traps that we've established with it, it's false. It's a counterfeit. So the government is going to tell you, and if they do, you should be highly suspicious, I think, generally speaking. The military-industrial prison is not going to tell you. And what they tell you, I wouldn't trust. Any people in possession of non-human artifacts, intelligences, or excuse me, intelligence from non-humans, and I'm one of those people, or biologics, that's a speciation event. That represents a branching off of a new faction of humanity that is in possession of materials that distinguish it from everybody else. There's no way those factions are going to give up that power. It's it's Wizard of Ozzy, it's Holy Grail-y, it's fake Holy Grail-y. So, this is part of why people like Gary Nolan and Jacques Vallée and Diana Pasulka have forged this community called the Soul Foundation, right? They want to inquire directly themselves into this phenomena and try to gain insight and understanding about its nature. Now, obviously, when you get insight or understanding about the nature of something that seems to be outside you, naturally it changes what you understand about who you are and can be. So whatever knowledge we might acquire about non-human intelligences, UFO, UAP, etc., will naturally transform what it means to be human. You can't learn something new and not be transformed by it. That's one of the promises and potentials of the situation as it exists at the moment. If we get enough time as humans with the luxuries that we now enjoy of, for those of us who are not living in abject poverty, the luxury to pursue our curiosity, our wonder, our awe, our passion into new dimensions of our own humanity. So these are some of the thoughts that I've been concerned with over the past, I don't know, hour and a half or something. I'm so grateful to everyone who comes and listens and participates and supports my work. I'm dearly hopeful that I will get to have another conversation with Dr. Hillman. I also hope to have a future conversation with Dr. Kuyawa, who unfortunately we only had a very brief conversation recently. And if any of you happen to be in contact with Diana Pasulka, I would very much appreciate an introduction. I think she and I might have some fascinating things to discuss together. So, yeah, if you have any idea how to contact her in a way that will break through the noise wall that she's probably subjected to, please let me know, or if you know her personally, um, see if you could arrange an introduction. So grateful for this time together. Much appreciation to you, all blessings to you and your way of life, your intelligence, your mind, your nature, your dreaming, your memory. I look forward to learning together again very soon. Bye-bye for now. After I finished this recording and I was uploading it and taking a moment to reflect back, improvisation is a relatively challenging experience. Most of us, we will tend to pursue roles that are familiar to us because we know how they work, right? We've been through them 1,000 times, and so we'll take on the role of expositor, right? The lecturer, or the spectator, or the rescuer, or the victim, or the perpetrator, right? We know how all that stuff works. But improvisation is a lot more challenging because we don't know how it works. And most of the true rewards that are available to us are not only unknown to many of us, they are unexpectable, right? They are mysterious. And the really good stuff about our humanity is like that. It comes from play and experiment, from engaging passionately with the possibility space of our existence. And we moderns, we live like fish in a tank, okay? And we think that that's liberty or freedom. We ache for justice, but we've never really known what it looks like, because let's just get sane for a moment together. Punishing the people who have themselves been so tormented that they harm other beings, right? Or limit the health or freedom of other beings. That doesn't establish justice. If anything's clear from the experiment of our modernity, it must be this. So justice looks like the mutual establishment of a context in which we can actually taste and explore what it means to be free. And what it means to be free does not mean to be unmolested by your fellow beings. It means the mutual establishment and maintenance, sustainment, nourishment of contexts that are so rich and deep, that are the things that we've held in our hearts, often silently, throughout our lives, because we're afraid if we were to speak them or enact them, we would be evicted from, the weird, dead outer space of civilization, right? It falls to us to recognize that freedom is not the freedom to destroy the history and future of life on Earth, to stack up dollars in banks. And justice is not filling prisons with human beings who were themselves tormented and deprived, right? This is not justice. Justice would be something like establishing contexts together that are so alive and human and rich with mystery and play and exploration that we could begin to understand something of what our human nature actually is. And that's something that we have to do together, with and for each other, and the history and future of life on this world. That's the challenge we're faced with. Not new better machines, right? Not artificial intelligence, human intelligence, which we've rarely seen sophisticated examples of. And when we do, it's often just in one little highly specialized field. Um, so, you know, as I was preparing to upload my video, I realized that I wanted to reach out to each and every one of you who's listening and ask you to engage meaningfully, heartfully, profoundly with the people that you know. Get together and form the agreement that for the next hour or 2 hours, we're going to try to see better together. It's not about who knows what's right or whose belief is dominant, whose idea of what's true is the good one, right? Intelligence is symphonic. It requires a kind of a music of inspiration and wonder and awe and memory. And we humans are naturally inclined toward this. We're just stuck in the fish tank of our common sort of um, inhibiting expectations and descriptions and explanations and experience that we so rarely taste this. You know, those of you who are parents can see the spirit of inquiry and play alive in your children, and you may feel like, well, that's not going to sustain them within the representational overlay that the humans demand of us. Are you sure? Maybe those children are filled with the medicine that we need to heal, to learn, and to grow together. Maybe our elders are filled with that medicine, an ache for meaningful, deep, rich play and exploration, wonder, joy. So this is our actual responsibility as humans, to establish contexts in which the possibilities of freedom expand into aliveness and are not dictated by rules and legalities and commerce and cash, right? So this is really the invitation that I'm placing on the table here now with you. Find others of like mind, get together, sit down and discuss and explore the possibilities, which are infinitely deep and mysterious, that are alive in the hearts of every being who has one. Let's bring each other back to life, to wonder, to inquiry, to insight, and to understanding instead of overstanding. Peace for now. Thank you.